journey to lost civilizations. See ancient artifacts and long-lost ancient scrolls.
The strange writing on this clay brick is known as cuneiform. Now, the script was used for
Take the journey of a lifetime and travel to ancient Babylon and the island of Patmos to discover how ancient mysteries reveal the future. A live seminar series. Don't miss any program.
It's just great that we have a site that's dedicated to the people of the community out here in West, and particularly in Ranui. And so I've got my fellow friends. They're all in different locations at this very time, doing the exact same presentations, and I think it's an exciting thing going all through the city of Auckland. So we're here for part 2, and I'm so glad that you could stay back for our second presentation. And I didn't get a chance to welcome those who came during the middle of the first one, so I just want to welcome you all out there in the back. Thank you so much for coming, and I'll get to say hello to you as you guys make your way out. So lovely. So part 2, our topic title is How Near is the End? And you've come to an Ancient Mysteries seminar. The advertising probably captured your attention. This idea of revealing the future. What does the future hold? And we've made no, qualms about where we believe where we can find peace and hope, and that's found in the biblical records. And so I understand that we're living in a culture where the Bible is basically under attack. It's been ridiculed and basically criticized by laymen and scholars alike. And that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But I would just like to suggest to you over these next few weeks that you would see the data for yourself. And I believe that we all have a mind. We all can reason. Some of us can even jump online and use the internet. Go and do some research and see what if I'm saying is actually true. More importantly, not what I'm saying, but what the biblical record is saying. And so this evening I want to take us on a journey through the city of Pompeii, and where the topic is how near is the end. And so we begin our second presentation this evening by taking us on a journey through to Pompeii. Now Pompeii is in Italy, and it is a fascinating story. I'm not going to ask who's been to Pompeii. Are you going to raise your hand again? Yes, you have been to Pompeii. I think you were following me on my trip. Lovely. Well, these pictures are from what now is Pompeii today. And in fact, it is quite an archaeological masterpiece, because basically when this volcano, which I'll explain, erupted, basically kept everything intact, because this volcano took this whole city by surprise. And that's what I want to share as we lead into our topic tonight. As you journey through where once Pompeii stood, you would see large homes. You would see, if you lived in the city of Pompeii during this time, you would have perhaps walked through to the marketplace or the open forum to get your veggies. Probably wasn't called Countdown back then, but it was something of that effect. You would have perhaps walked to the wool merchants to buy your garments when it was cold during this part of the year. You probably would have went to the bakery. And there's nothing more beautiful than smelling some fresh bread, right? Just in the morning. So you would have walked past and you would have seen your local baker. You would have grabbed a good old loaf of bread. And you would have even stopped by something looking like this, their version of fast food. It's kind of like the McDonald's of the ancient times, where you'd stop by and you'd have a bit of a food on the run. And if you really liked to, you could stop by the amphitheatre, and where you would sit and you would watch all these amazing plays. By the way, you know, archaeologists, they would estimate the population city, number of people who lived there, by looking at the amphitheatre. And what they would do is they would calculate however many people would sit in these amphitheatres, they would times it by 10. And they would give a rough estimate, I believe I'm saying correct calculation, of how many people would live. So you can have an idea of how many people would have lived in Rome by the gigantic size of the Colosseum. And so if you lived in the city of Pompeii, you would have stopped by the theatres to watch the local movie flicks. Or if you're like me, you probably maybe would have been here in the sports arena. You probably would have watched some of the sports that were going on in that time. And what Rome was very well known for is they basically introduced the idea of hydrotherapy. They were big on Roman bathhouses. So these are the remains of these gigantic bathhouses where they would sit, kind of like saunas, hot and cold water treatments, things of that nature. But you know, one thing that Pompeii, you may not know, it was actually a very vile place. And in fact, if you go there today, you would see remains of where stood brothels. Don't have any other way of saying it. Prostitution houses. And there are pictures on top of this wall that I'm not going to share with you in tonight's presentation because they were quite graphic. And basically, Pompeii actually had quite a reputation. It was a city of vice. And if you wanted to, live the wild life, this is where you came. In fact, in some of the inscriptions on some of the walls, it was inscripted, there was a letter in there saying it was Sodom and Gomorrah. And some of you may have heard the story in the Old Testament of that city, Sodom and Gomorrah, and what happened to it. So it gives you a bit of an idea of the city of Pompeii and the type of lifestyle that the people lived back then. And not only that, Rome was very big on pagan worship. They would worship these fertility gods. They would worship these statues and images. And so Pompeii, right at the center, at the heart of their city, was temples erected to their different gods. But the thing about Pompeii is that it was situated right at the base, and what stood behind it was a mountain, a volcano actually. It was called Mount Vesuvius. And the story and the reason why I want to share that is because what stands behind it is this volcano, and a few things happened with this volcano. Back in 62 AD, it actually rumbled, and there was the beginnings of what we call an earthquake in the city of Pompeii in 62 AD. But the city inhabitants of Pompeii, they're like, oh, she'll be alright, it's nothing major, it's just a little bit of a shake, we'll get over this. And so they did not pay attention. And so some of the city was in ruins. They rebuilt the city, and they carried along in their life just as though nothing had happened. And then the same thing happened again. Back in 79 AD, the volcano basically rumbled again, and it caused a bit of a minor earthquake there. But again, the inhabitants of Pompeii just brushed it off and said, well, that's just what volcanoes do. Let's continue watching the game. That's what they were talking. That's just their attitude there in Pompeii. But you know what? They had their final warning. In fact, it wasn't a warning. This was it. Back in 79 AD, in August of that year, history says, August 24, the volcano actually erupted. And all this, I don't know the name of the gas, but it basically poured out this pumice, I think it's called, and it actually spewed out all the volcano, and it basically ran all the way through to the city of Pompeii. Basically, everybody died. Everybody. Just like that. You could be sitting there in the amphitheater watching the flick. At the end of the day, you were smouldering dust. You were overtaken by this eruption of this volcano. Now, the reason why I want to share this is because it has a lot of connections to the predictions in which I want to share with you this evening. In fact, can you see those pictures there? These are the bodies of people who were basically caught up when the volcano erupted. If you go to Pompeii, and I went there as well last year in September, you will see right at the end of your tour, these were the body figures of those who died in this volcano eruption. In fact, I remember succinctly, one of the images I saw was, obviously must be a mother, it was a lady actually holding her baby, and she was trying to cover the baby from the volcano eruption. And so, I don't say this presentation, I'm just going to be quite frank, it's a very sobering one. because the city of Pompeii is a striking example of what can happen when we do not take the predictions and the signs and as seriously. That's the main message of why I want to lead into my talk tonight with the city of Pompeii. Now, let me digress. I want to go back to the biblical record. We're talking again about Jerusalem. Some 2,000 years ago, we're going back to just a little bit of the last presentation. Jesus predicted some of these things. We shared this last presentation. Jesus predicted things about Jerusalem being destroyed, the temple, and the Jewish nation. And I left off last presentation by saying that Christ's predictions were actually fulfilled. And so we go back to the story there where Jesus was asked a question by the disciples. He said, tell us, this is the disciples speaking to Jesus. Remember, they're all sitting on the Mount of Olives. They're looking at the temple. So tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming? And what did the disciples say next? The end of the world. You see, the disciples, when Jesus was saying that the city would be destroyed, the Jewish mindset equated the temple destruction as the end of the world. So they're asking the question, well, when is this going to happen, Jesus? And when is the end of the world going to be? And so what does Jesus do next? And it's fascinating. If you have the time, if you go home and you jump online, you type in Matthew 24 on Google and it'll come up with a Bible link. I encourage you to read it because the whole chapter talks about predictions that Jesus said our state of the world will be in just before his return. And that's going to be the bulk of what I'm sharing this evening. So Jesus talked about certain, what we would like to say, signs of the end. It's kind of like me when I was driving here. I'm kind of new to New Zealand. I don't know my way around, so I've got my little navigator, thing in the car. And so when I'm driving, I see certain signs. I better not say it. I don't want to insult the people here, but I see all the signs. Okay, let's just say signs, and it tells me exits over here, exits over here. In fact, last night I got lost on the nav, and I ended up over the bridge going north. I saw the Sky City Tower there, and I'm driving there, and I was supposed to be. It was hilarious. Got home very late last night. So signs are important. And what we're going to find tonight is that when Jesus talked about the end, so-called, of the world or his return, he didn't give us a day and an hour. He doesn't say, you know what? It will end on, like we saw last night, 2012. Jesus doesn't give us a date, but he does give us certain signs. So we see the signs, we can say, yes, okay, I see that. Okay, this is what he was talking about. We know the end is near. And the reason why I want to share that with you this evening is I'm hoping that tonight, by the end of our talk, you can walk away and say, wow, it's kind of true what he's saying. It almost sounds like Jesus is living right now, and just looked at our news over the last week. And that's what you're going to find tonight. So, the signs of the end. In fact, I'd like to suggest to you this evening, my friends, that we're living on the edge of eternity. And if you were here last night, we were looking at the prediction in the book of Daniel with the image, the statue. Remember that? And I was saying to you guys last night that we're living right on the feet or the toes of Earth's history. So we're living right on the edge of eternity. And so I want to go through a couple of the signs that Jesus outlines in the book of Matthew. And I don't know about you, but it seems to me like Jesus knew what he was talking about. And let me share this with you. Signs in the natural world. This is the first sign I'm going to look at tonight. So Jesus talked about the fact there will be signs in the natural world, in the environment around us. And I want you to notice what Jesus said. He tells us in the book of Matthew, and there will be earthquakes in what type of places? Various. Bible translation says diverse. In other words, there's going to be earthquakes all around the place. Now, is that happening today in our culture? Absolutely. In fact, you don't need to take my word for it. You've seen it for yourself on the news. About all the earthquakes in Haiti and in Christchurch, right in your very backyard. And if you know people who are involved in that, my condolences to you. And it must have been a pretty sombering time to be here in New Zealand. So you know very well about this fact about the earthquakes. Japan, we all know that devastating tsunami that hit, and over there in Nepal as well. We also notice that earthquakes are increasing. If you notice that in the first 10 years of the 20th century, there were somewhat of 18 recorded earthquakes over the 6 years. But then if you fast forward the last 10 years of the 20th century, we would notice that there are 42 recorded earthquakes over the 6 years. And then, not over 6 years, over 7 on the Richter scale. That's what it's talking about, not over 6 years. Over 7 on the Richter scale, right? But in the first 10 years of the 21st century, there have been over 200 earthquakes, over 7. So, isn't that amazing that Jesus some 2,000 years ago says, guess what? Right before the end of time, you're going to see tremendous earthquakes. That's the first sign that Jesus says. But then Jesus also tells us something about human condition. He says there are going to be famines in the world. And notice what Jesus is saying back in the book of Matthew. Jesus predicted that there will be famines. Now, is that true today, friends? Absolutely. Did you know that 24,000 people... I found this kind of hard to digest as I was going over my notes. 24,000 people died daily from hunger. Are we a blessed people living in New Zealand?
Yes.
We are. I could almost assume that every one of us had food to eat today. 24,000 people died from hunger. That works out to one person every 3.6 seconds. So it's tragic. Yet Jesus predicted this would happen. Did you know that over 500 million people are desperate for a meal today? And we just don't see it because we live in a place like here, but there are people living in the world, my friends, who would even love to eat what is in our rubbish bins. And that's the sad reality of the world we live in. Over 900 million people go to bed hungry every night. That's the world we live in. And it's a sobering thought to think that there's someone across this world who is going to sleep with nothing to eat. And it's a very sobering statistic. Jesus also predicted that there would actually be tsunamis and cyclones and floods. We're told also in the book of Luke that there will be, this is Jesus speaking again, it's the same story that is found in the book of Matthew, it's also described in the Gospel of Luke. And so Jesus says to the disciples that there will be distress of nations with perplexity. Then he also says, the sea and the waves roaring. Now what did he mean? He meant that in the last days, that the environment around us is just going to be totally out of control, right? Now we all know what happened back there in the tsunami back there in Southeast Asia. I even remember it. I was over in Fiji visiting my grandparents over there in 2004, Christmas time. We turned on the news on Boxing Day and we saw all this catastrophe happening all over the world. They say that, and this is only a rough estimate, that over 250,000 people lost their lives during the tsunami. And what a sobering thing to know. My friend, nations are anxious about such terrifying events. Now, I cannot possibly imagine what people have gone through during these tremendous times. But these things are happening, and this is the world which we're living in. Jesus predicted what's happening in our world with accuracy. And friends, I keep coming to this point. The Bible is historically accurate, and number two, because what has been predicted is actually coming to pass. So we're looking, that's just a brief synopsis on signs in the natural world. Let me go to the second point for you tonight, and that's signs in the political world. Jesus actually said something about the political nature of what will be happening in the end times. Jesus tells us, said to the disciples in the book of Matthew, he said, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. So Jesus said right there on the edge of time, it's going to be a nation where war is just going to be a part of the fabric of society. And did you know that there are 30 wars every year? We only hear about the big ones, right? The ones that the news likes to, really hype and over-sensationalize. There are 30 wars every year, and over $100 million is spent on war every hour. That's mind-boggling. When there's people in the world starving today, we're spending money on guns and nuclear bombs to kill each other. That's the state of the world we're living in. In fact, 80 times is more spent on war than is needed to provide water and sanitation to the world. The world is messed up, that's what it's telling me. In fact, there are 27,000 nuclear bombs in stock among the nations. And we all see what's going on in the news with North Korea and South Korea, and now Iran is now emerging on the scene. We're living in a very hostile environment where at any moment, one of these mad lunatics can just take one of these nukes and just bomb an entire nation. That's what could happen in our society today. So we're living in a world of international global conflicts, and that's what Jesus said 2,000 years ago. You will hear of wars and rumours of wars. That's what he said. In fact, Jesus also tells the disciples in Matthew chapter 24, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. So Jesus is not painting a pretty picture in the end times. He's not saying everybody's just going to get along and everyone's just going to be fine. He says nation's going to be fighting against nation. In fact, in the book of Revelation, at the end of the New Testament, it says that the nations were angry. They were what, everybody? Angry. They were angry. Did you know also that in the 20th century, that over 180 million people have died from war alone? I want you to just let that sink in. I'm not talking about through the expansive human history. This is just in the 20th century. In the last 100 years, over 180 million people have died. We live in a world of nuclear conflict. We live in a world where nations are fighting against nation. I think that is a very easy point to portray to you because you see it all over the news every day. We see the wars happening in the Middle East with Israel and Iran, and we just seem to be bombarded by these messages that's coming through our TVs and through social media. We also know about the world of terrorism that we live in. I shared last night about the Westminster attack. This is just a part of life, isn't it? And it's just coming closer and closer to home. And unfortunately, that's the life in which we're living. So that's somewhat a summary of signs in the political world. Now I want to turn to signs in the social world. Now, this might be a bit alarming for some people because Jesus actually predicted the state of people's hearts. Hear what I'm saying? The type of people that will be living right there before his return. I want you to notice what he's saying here. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow hot. Is that what the text is saying? No. Jesus says that the love of many will grow cold. People are going to be cold to each other. It's going to be a very evil society. That's what Jesus is saying. And then he goes on to say, there's another text in the scripture. It says, but know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. Another word for perilous is dangerous. And why is it dangerous? Well, notice the condition of people. For men will be lovers of themselves. Does that sound familiar? Lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving. It's not a good description, is it? Slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. The Bible says that right there at the end of time, there will be a generation of people who all they think about is themselves, and they're all about money and chasing their careers and things that are worth looking into, things that have meaning and purpose in life. Is going to take the back seat. We also live in a world where crime is just part of our daily lives, isn't it? You know, I want to give you some of these statistics that gives you an idea of just how our human nature, if I can put it that way, has evolved over the years. I want to show you a list of the top school problems back in the 1940s, and some of you may have been at school at this age. I want you to notice some of the list of what they would consider in the 1940s. This was really bad. You ready? Talking in class. Very bad. Chewing gum. That was absolutely ludicrous. making noise, running in the hallway, cutting in line, and no uniform. Now, that sounds like a very rebellious generation, doesn't it? That was back in the 1940s. But if you look at today's generation, do you know what some of the top school problem is? Oh, obviously littering, rubbish. If you compare that with the top school problems in our day, in the year 2000s, drug use, alcohol abuse, pregnancy, suicide, rape, robbery, and assault. I live in Australia in a place called Grafton, 6 hours north of Sydney. Do you know that where I live in the Clarence Valley, it has the highest rate of youth suicide in Australia. And Australia has one of the highest youth suicide rates in the world. I know a person who, I went to the school down the road from where the church where I am, and I went and spoke to the local principal. They had 3 kids in year 11 and 12 who committed suicide in the last 3 years. And it's just an epidemic amongst the young people in Australia. People are living without hope. They're living without meaning. Top school problems. Did you know that today in New Zealand, the research is telling us that 1 out of 3 girls may be sexually abused before she turns 16 years old? 1 out of every 3 girls may be sexually abused. Statistics also tell us that in your country, here in New Zealand, approximately 1 in 5 New Zealand women will experience a serious sexual assault one time or another in their life. The statistics also tell us that young people in New Zealand, from the ages of 16 to 24 years old, the age group, they are 4 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than any other age group. And friends, this is not coming from strangers that they don't know. It's coming from people that are in their family and their friends and relatives. And so when we're talking about the breakdown of the moral society, it's happening not just out in the world, it's happening right here as well. Signs in the social world. That's some of the things we've looked at. I want to take you now to signs in the religious world. Jesus talked about things that would happen from a religious standpoint. He said in the book of Matthew chapter 7, he said, beware of what, everybody? False prophets. He said, you'll know them by their fruits. And if you ever have the chance to read Matthew chapter 24, when the disciples asked Jesus, what will be the sign of your return? Do you know what the first thing that Jesus says? He says, take heed that no one deceive you. He says it 3 times in that chapter. Verse 5, verse 11, verse 24. Take heed no one deceive you. Make sure no one deceives you. There's going to be false prophets. Beware. So in the last days, Jesus is saying that in the last days, there's going to be a plethora of religious people leading people astray. He says, beware of false prophets. You'll know them by their fruits. And I didn't have time to kind of delve into this, but you can Google it on your internet when you get home. Jim Jones, the famous cult there in the 70s, back in America. David Koresh and the Waco cult, the Jewish messiahs. There's one guy in northern Queensland who's claiming to be Jesus. He came on the TV a few years ago. And so there's these people that are walking around saying, I'm Jesus. And so we can sit here and laugh about it, but there are people who have been deceived by it. Jesus says in the last days, take heed. Beware of false prophets. Beware. Take heed that no one deceive you. Another thing that I believe that the Bible would predict that would happen in the last days, there will be a disbelief in the creation by God. You see, it wasn't long ago that it was a common thought that God was a creator of the world. Now we live in a culture where that is basically being disputed, and basically learned people, so to speak, would say that's absolutely rubbish. That's not true. This world, that is not how it came about. And so we are told that in the last days that there will be disbelief in creation, and this idea of Darwinian evolution would be something that would come on the scene. Now, I'm not here to try and disrepute people who have that belief, but I am saying that these are some of the things that would come right here at the end of time. Listen to what the scriptures say in this book of 2 Peter, talking about a prediction of those living in the last days. It said, knowing this first, that in the last days they willfully forget that by the word of God the heavens were of old. Now, can I just pause and point a couple of things? when the Bible keeps talking about the last day, it's talking about the return of Jesus. So when the Bible writers talk about the last days, it's not like a doom and gloom, oh, watch out, the end of the world. It's talking about the return of Jesus. And what Peter is being writes here in the scriptures, he's saying that right before the return of Jesus, there will be some who would not believe in the biblical account of creation. That's what he's saying. They will willfully forget that by the word of God, the heavens were of old. You know, we've looked at some of the signs, but you know what I think one of the greatest signs that the end is near is the spread of the gospel of God. And if you're new to this whole religious thing and you never know what the word gospel means, it simply just means good news. That's what it means, good news. And one of the signs that Jesus said to the disciples that we would know that his return is near is that he actually says that the gospel, the news of Jesus, would go to the whole world as a witness. Then the end will come. In fact, it's right there. Matthew 24, in verse 14. Jesus says, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a what, everybody? A witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. And you know what that tells me as a believer? It tells me that as the message of Jesus and as the story of Jesus goes to the whole world, we are actually playing a part in hastening the return of the Messiah Jesus. And so for me, that's what gives me so much good news. That's what motivates me to do what I'm doing, because one of the greatest signs that I see in the scripture is the news of Jesus will go to the whole world. And so Time magazine wrote a few years ago, it says there the spread of Christianity. It says adherents to that faith, talking about Christianity, have more than tripled all across Asia since 1970, jumping from just over 100 million to over 350 million today. That's quite a substantial growth of people who have professed to follow Jesus. Now, I've just got a short video here that tells us that all over the world, people are making a decision to follow Jesus. And do you know where one of the biggest movements of Christianity is taking place at this moment? It's in China. Underground China. If you YouTube some of the house church movements that are happening all across China, it is a fascinating story of people who are giving their lives to Jesus. And so, friends, when we're talking about the signs of Jesus' return, one of the signs Jesus said is that this story of Jesus will go to the whole world. And friends, it's happening right now. It's going to New Zealand, and it's going to Africa, it's going to China, it's going to the little islands in the Pacific, it's going everywhere. And when everyone, and if you really recognize the verse, if I have to go back to it, it says it will be preached in the world as a witness. You know what that means, friends? Everybody will have a chance to hear the message, and they will have to either choose and decide whether they will accept it and follow it, or they will reject it. It doesn't say that it will be preached till everybody believes. It said it will be preached as a witness. And friends, if you're sitting here tonight and you are a follower of Jesus, the greatest thing that you could do for your cause and your faith is to simply be the Christian that God's called you to be. And let God do the rest. The gospel is going to the whole world. It's going out to South America. I can see some South Americans here tonight. And it's going out to the Philippines. And surely there's some Filipinos tonight. Yes, sir. Absolutely. And surely there's some African brothers and sisters here tonight. Yes. Yes. Amen. Yes. It's going everywhere. And even in India. Any Indians here tonight? Oh, yes. We have two faithful ones right in the middle. The reason I share this because there are fascinating stories of what's happening in India, a place where religion is a big part of their culture, and people are coming to know about the story of Jesus for the first time. And there is a tremendous revival taking place in India at this very moment. So what have we done this evening in our second presentation? We've looked at some of the global warnings that Jesus predicted. We saw some signs in the natural. And by the way, this is just a very summary of what the scriptures are saying. You could take one of these aspects and just delve into it, just deeper and deeper. I'm giving you a broad picture tonight. So we've looked at, very briefly, global warnings in the natural world. We've looked at global warnings in the political world, in the social world, and we've also looked at warnings in the religious world. And the question that I'm asking you tonight is this. If you're sitting here tonight and go, so what, Will? What's it all mean? What's the point of you sharing all this? It comes down to this. Jesus says this. In the book of Matthew, he said, when you see all these things, know that it, reference to his return, is near, even at the doors. So what does Jesus say to us tonight? He says, when you see all the wars, when you see the rumors, when you see the earthquake, when you see the tsunamis, when you see the moral decay in our society, when you see the gospel go to all the world, when you see all of this happen, it's for one reason, to let you know that my return is near. And if I could just say it quite bluntly, Jesus is coming soon. And the reason why we're here tonight is to let you know that there is something you can trust. It is the Bible, but more importantly, there is someone you can trust. And I believe it's found in the person of Jesus Christ. So, I end my thought tonight with this question. What should our reaction be? If you're sitting here tonight and you're a bit skeptical of what I've been saying, I would prayerfully say to you tonight to go home, look at what I'm suggesting to you online, if you have a Bible, and ask yourself, is what he said 2,000 years ago, is it happening right now? And if so, what is the meaning of this? I'd like to suggest to you that the meaning of this is because he wants you to be ready when he returns. I love what Jesus says here. We've only got a few minutes left. He says in Luke chapter 21, now when these things begin to happen, what does Jesus say? Where does he say to look? He says, look up and lift up your head because your redemption draws near. In other words, what Jesus is saying is that when you see these things happening, don't keep your focus downward, keep it upward. In other words, there is hope. That's what he's saying. Look up. Although there's hunger in the world, look up. Although there is famine and decay and war and rumors of wars, look up because your redemption draweth nigh. In other words, it's drawing near. I would like to end with this thought tonight, friends. That if you were here last night, we shared about the statue image. And we shared last night that we are on the very toes of time. And does anyone remember what happened next in that vision of the book of Daniel? The stone came. That stone represents God's kingdom. You know, back in my former days, I used to gamble a little bit. And any gambler would know that if you could look back and have some pretty solid predictions, that you would bet on the right thing, right? So I would say to myself, when I saw this stuff for the first time, if God predicted Babylon would come on the scene and they came, predicted Medo-Persia and Greece and Rome and the division of Rome, if the Bible's got 4 out of 4 right, do you think possibly that the 5th one could be right too? Absolutely. God's empire is about to take over. You know, the reason why we share these meetings is firstly for information. People want to know about archaeology, they want to know about the future and so forth. But the reason why we're running these meetings is so that you can walk out of this room this evening and you can live your life with meaning and hope. With meaning and hope that there is something better to look forward to. You know, the reason why I'm so excited to share these things because when I was 24 years old, I heard these meetings like this for the very first time and changed my life. I can't begin to tell you what God has done in my life and why I'm standing here today. If you had told me some 12 years ago that I would be standing in a place in Ranui, New Zealand, taking some lectures, I'd go, you've been out of your mind. But I stand here before you to say that I have meaning in my life because I've seen the predictions. I've seen that the Bible can be trusted. And more importantly, I've seen that there is someone behind the scriptures that that I can trust. His name's Jesus. So I leave that thought with you tonight to think about what I've been saying and to prayerfully consider where you are and how you've been responding. Because I know the wheels are turning in your mind. Like, is this really right? You know, I leave that with you to think about, and I'd love to see you back here tomorrow night where we continue our series again. So that's it for tonight. And thank you, Bryn. We're going to have a very special gift for you. We're going to make this available on your way out. We're going to have a free magazine, Archaeological Diggings magazine, Amazing Discoveries, about the different sites that we've been talking about over the last 2 nights. So please grab a copy. There's enough for everyone on your way out. So, 7 tomorrow, yes. Thank you for clarifying. 7 tomorrow, because the weekend is 6. Tomorrow night, 7. We have 2 sessions tomorrow as well. So tomorrow night, if you're keen for the 2 sessions, it'll be from 7 to 9, but I'll get you out as early as I can, okay? So thank you so much for coming, and I'd love to see you tomorrow night. God bless you and have a good evening.
Come on a journey to lost civilizations. See ancient artifacts and long-lost ancient scrolls.
The strange writing on this clay brick is known as cuneiform. Now, the script was
Hear
used
international presenter Gary Webster and travel with him to ancient Babylon and the island of Patmos to discover how ancient mysteries reveal the future. A free live international seminar series commencing June 16 across Auckland. For the nearest venue and bookings, visit am2017.co.nz or call 0800 AM 2017.